symbols in your homeschooling? Well, what is a symbol to you, first of all? Let's figure that out first.
Symbols. Okay, so I can tell you something that I learned about symbols through my process of homeschooling.
Okay.
And it's a story, so there you go.
All right, we got a story.
So one of my children is on a completely different timetable for learning, completely different than my other children. I don't know if anyone else relates to that, but
well, all mine are exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
I don't relate
This
at all.
child, bless his heart, is so wonderful and so gifted. But as we've been going through the learning process, I find out I have to do everything completely different. Like nothing that I did before works.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, so of course I signed him up in piano lessons because that's what we do. And he had a teacher who would constantly, drill him on the notes on the piano. A, B, C. Now point to me all the C's. Point to me all the D's. Because that's a symbol.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
That's a symbol. And the D is a symbol for that key and that note. And it has meaning to it. So he couldn't remember them. Could not remember them. Weeks, months, could not. And I was like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So I did what I always do. I call my mom.
Huh? What are you doing?
And I'm like, what am I going to do? Because I'm starting to have a heart attack about this. What am I going to do? And she said, and my mother is very experienced in music education and child development as it pertains to music education. Okay. She's written her own string curriculum and done a lot of studying in that area. So she told me, she said, well, you have to understand that not all children understand symbols. Like cognitively, they're not able to understand symbols all at the same age or the same time. It's a brain development thing.
Oh, okay.
And in order to be able to read, so he was also struggling with that, obviously, because if he doesn't know the letters, he just doesn't know the letters. Right, so he's not going to be able to read either. Yeah. And she said and I think he was 6, so he'd probably had piano lessons for a couple of years.
Okay.
Hello. Anyway, and he just didn't understand that. And she said he's not cognitively able to understand the concept of a symbol that doesn't have meaning to him. It doesn't. Yeah. It's too abstract. A, what is that? I can say A to him. It doesn't stick to anything in his mind. Yeah. So it's not, like to you it's a symbol, to him it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Yeah, right? And so, so she said, but most children are able to do that by the time they're 8. So when you have children who aren't able to read when they're 4 or they're 5 or they're 6, it's because they just haven't
figured out the use of symbols.
Well, just cognitively, their brain is still developing. Right, it's still coming in. It's still coming in. Yeah. Which is actually, interestingly, that's where we found Waldorf education, was because it was an answer to my prayer that I didn't pray yet for that child. Yeah. Because it was fantastic for him to be able to hear a story and just allow it to soak in and let him get from it whatever he needed to get from it without any pressure of having to learn it or having to do it intentional. Just to be able to immerse himself in that place of learning. Yeah, so anyway, long story short, his teacher moved, so we had to get a new one. And the very first day in his lesson, she knew exactly what was happening. And she said, okay, so here's the deal. 2 black keys, the doghouse. And he can understand what a doghouse is. He understands that symbol, right? He can understand that. So she said, so what lives in the doghouse? The dog. So the key between the 2 black keys is D. Yeah. So that's the dog. And what are the 2 animals that don't fit or that can't go in the doghouse? A cat, because it will fight with the dog, and an elephant, because it's too big.
And they're beside them.
Right? So they're outside the 2 black keys. And so from now on, instead of asking him, point to all the D's, she would just say, okay, show me all the dogs. Boom, 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 boom. And he could just, all of a sudden he was succeeding at doing that. He could get that. Very cool. And then there was one for the 3 black keys as well that was just as adorable. And I was like, okay, thank you for helping him win, and helping him to understand
and succeed
that concept of symbols and how. Yeah. Anyway.
And the confidence that gave him, I'm sure.
Probably does not answer your question about symbols, but
no,
that's
actually,
my symbol. That's my symbol story.
Yeah. No, I think so, because President Packer said that no symbol can be fully defined. Ever. Right? Because
that's cool.
there is so many facets to a symbol. And so you're saying D, and I can make sure that I see the two black keys and I can see that, right? But he couldn't see it until you changed the facet just slightly and saw the doghouse instead. So yeah, it's just changing the diamond to slightly different place. And so, yeah, that's a beautiful story. It's a perfect analogy, actually, to showing how different a symbol can be for different people.
The symbols lend themselves so beautifully to that concept of the greater and the lesser portion. You know, we can study the scriptures, just like you said, it can't ever be fully defined. So there's that surface piece of the symbol, and then you can go deeper, and you can go deeper, and you can go deeper. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot lately too, because in order to get to that greater portion, that is something that's going to be taught by the Spirit. It's not ever going to be in the manual.
Yep. Well,
and I got a lot less frustrated once I figured that out. It's not going to be in the manual. It's something between you and the Lord. When you're ready.
It has to be, right? So
absolutely.
if you open up a foreign language book and you can't read it, and you're like, how do I figure this out? No one's there to teach you, and you have to have only the Spirit. That's the only person that can teach you, and the Spirit can teach you. I remember I was in a conference and I was sitting next to a girl one time, and she said, actually, I think the facilitator was trying to ask about the Spirit and stuff, and she stood up and she said, she told this amazing story about how she was crocheting something and she couldn't figure out how to crochet it. And she goes, I just got this last stitch, and it was going to be a wedding gift. And she goes, I've got this last stitch that I have to do a couple times, but I can't figure it out. And she just tried and tried. She looked on the internet. She couldn't remember it at all. It was her grandmother that had taught her years and years ago. And she says, I just said a strong prayer that night. I've got to have this stitch. And that night she dreamt about Jesus coming and showing her the stitch and how to do it. And she goes, I know most of you don't believe that Jesus can crochet, but I can guarantee you he does.
Totally
and
knows
so
how to crochet.
she learned how to crochet from that dream.
That reminds me of another story that I heard that's been on my mind recently too, about a girl who was in the MTC. I heard it from her mother.
Okay.
She was in the MTC first day. The instructor, their teacher, told them, tomorrow we're only going to speak in the language. And it was some really not a common language, like Tagalog or something like that. Okay. So like not something, you took in high school.
Right.
Tomorrow we're only speaking in that language. So you have today to prepare for that. And so,
oh my goodness.
And so of course all of these new missionaries freaking out, they go back to their rooms to study, and they're still trying to learn the language, they're trying to memorize the words, and she just knew that was not going to happen. Like there was no way. So she just went to her scriptures, she went into prayer and meditation, and prepared herself spiritually for that following day. And on the morning, she was the only one that could do it. Wow. She could speak the language.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
I love that about the Spirit.
And I've had that thought in my own life. Sometimes I just feel totally overwhelmed with things. And I think there is no way. There's no way that I can do that. And so whenever that happens, then the go-to place is spiritual preparation.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
To be notified of our newest YouTube videos, be sure to click the subscribe button here. Head over to our new website for the latest gifts and promotions. For more videos like this one, click this playlist here.